Hey, so this video is going to be your ultimate guide to understanding the difference between tropical, sidereal, and true sidereal zodiac systems for anyone interested in astrology or human design. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the origin of these different systems and also what it is that they measure so that you have a better picture for which system is right for you. And we're going to be covering some things here that are not really covered anywhere else on this subject. In other words, we're going to go deep, really deep. So some of the stuff I'm going to be chatting about in this video lies a little outside what is conventionally discussed, but it's viewed from a perspective of the deeper esoteric or spiritual significance behind these systems. So I'm really looking at the higher dimensional energy behind these so that you can have a very well-rounded perspective and figure out what system is best for you. Because as these days, as people awaken, people are starting to look to, bend rules, break barriers, and push the envelope on a scale never seen before when it comes to looking at their charts under a new light to glean various insights about who they are from a deeper perspective, which I call a multidimensional perspective. So there's a movement underway right now for people that are beginning to wake up to this multidimensional nature. And they can sometimes transcend the limited identity of a single chart or a single identity and personality. So people can say, I am Susan and I'm a starseed and I'm also a, Virgo priestess. And, you can be all of those things at different times. And we're realizing that, our gifts don't just lie in one sort of defined area. In that, in fact, our gifts are multifaceted. And when we begin to reclaim our multidimensional nature, we can kind of step into these different layers of ourselves. So we're not just talking about a higher self, but we're talking about higher selves. So basically, that's the point of this video, is to weigh in and provide a little bit more context behind the tropical and the various sidereal systems so that you have a well-rounded perspective for your own investigations. And maybe some of the stuff in this video will help you to uncover new facets of your identity and your multidimensional nature. So first things first, I want to clarify a couple things. Scientific materialists, the really rational ones, and I used to be one of these. I studied engineering and worked in the field for 12 years. But I always had a spiritual side to me. But I knew a lot of people that they just never will understand this topic. And as much as we try to conflate spirituality and science, they're basically starting from two ends of a spectrum, and there's still quite a big gap to cross. And this mostly has to do with the scientific models we use are still quite based on material observations. And we haven't yet developed scientific models for higher dimensions. And we haven't developed scientific models for subtle energies as well that exist in these higher dimensions. So yeah, it's not going to be a subject that the scientific materialists can weigh in on, because this is really looking at causality. This is looking at the deeper, subtle causes to things. In the same way, it's like science can't really explain consciousness, but consciousness is how we experience life and reality. So therefore, in the search of absolutism or undeniable proof, astrology and human design will actually leave you empty-handed. It will give the rationalists all the ammunition that they need to dismiss the subject, whether tropical or sidereal, it doesn't matter, because they do not understand causality and they don't understand anything that happens below the scale of an atom, where things start to get strange and they start to defy Newtonian physics. So really, we're talking about the quantum layer of reality. And this is the layer that, you hear people use the word quantum all the time. Now, well, there's a reason for it, is because that layer of reality, they're finding, behaves very differently than the Newtonian model for which a lot of our world is still engrossed in. Now, not to say we don't use quantum mechanics, but we're just dipping our toes into what's possible with the quantum as a collective. And finally, there's no wrong zodiac to use when given the choice between tropical and sidereal or true sidereal. They ultimately measure two different things. So the tropical zodiac measures the seasons of planet Earth. And it's also been said that this mirrors the seasons of the soul in the human being. And the sidereal zodiac is indexed against the galactic center. And so it's much more astronomical in its measurements, but also the Vedic astrologers believe that it maps the plight of the soul through time. And that's why astrologers often say the tropical zodiac depicts the personality and the sidereal zodiac depicts the soul. From a metaphysical perspective, they tell the same story, but on two different density layers, and one is not necessarily better than the other. With that out of the way, we can now explore the difference between each of these zodiacs and why you might want to use one or not, or use all of them. The sidereal zodiac is most commonly associated with Jyotish, the science of time telling for the Vedic traditions of India, also called Vedic astrology. The system is estimated to be somewhere between 5 and 10,000 years old and originated with the Vedantas along with yoga and Ayurveda. So Jyotish uses different astrological frameworks, but generally agrees with the Western astrology in stating that there's 12 zodiac signs and they each occupy 30 degrees of sky space. If only nature were so symmetrical and simple. But it is interesting that the Vedic astrologers and the Western astrologers do agree on the constellations and the fact that there's 12 of them and that they have this 30-degree boundary. So that is kind of uncanny, and that does suggest that maybe both systems share a common source. So now sidereal astrology agrees with astronomical observations, or at least it tries to. So what you see with your eyes, a constellation app, or a telescope is the same as the interpretation of where planets are against the backdrop of constellations. Now, this sounds obvious, like, shouldn't it just be this way? Shouldn't you be able to look up at the sky and see that? And that seems like, why would anyone do anything different? But you'll learn later that this is not the case with tropical or Western astrology. And this is the primary defining feature that separates tropical astrology, which is Western astrology, which is the most popular style on the internet, from sidereal astrology. And the funny part is that in order to calculate these positionings to make it so obvious to the eyes, it's actually extremely complicated, and it requires constantly recalculating something called ayanamshas to account for the fact that every year the precession of the equinoxes, due to the wobble of the Earth, the 26,000-year cycle, offsets the previous calculations by 1/72nd of a degree. So in other words, calculating sidereal astrology is basically like trying to hit a moving target. And every 72 years, it's offset by another degree. Mathematics aside, the sidereal zodiac is trying to say something very simple. What you see in the sky with regards to planets and constellations reflects your cosmic nature and the inherent geometry of the cosmos itself. It is based on nature, at least the cosmic nature of the celestial heavens. And how they actually are geometrically arranged. However, in order to calculate this, the mental gymnastics is basically why there's not a common consensus among sidereal astrologers. So various sages at various points in time created their own sidereal system by defining their own ayanamshas. I believe that there are over 10 sidereal systems currently in use. And some people still use these older ones, especially if they've been brought up in these lineages and traditions of astrology, because every system was correct for its time. And whenever enough people, pour into something, it does actually give it life. And one thing I've noticed is that you can pretty much use any system and find some kernel of truth within it. So who's to say the ones using some of these older systems, which have ayanamshas that are not, accurate with where things are today, they're still perfectly fine. Given that each system was correct for its time, they do kind of ultimately fail to provide accurate results in terms of the actual placement of, planets against the backdrop of constellations as time passes. But in our current age, the Fagan-Bradley or Lahiri ayanamshas are the most widely used. So Jyotish is actually very, very popular. It's part of everyday life in India. It is used to chart destinies. So families will often go to see astrologers for arranged marriages, for everyday kind of queries. It'll illuminate past karmas. So if people are really having difficult psychological problems with things that are kind of outside their blind spot, they can go and they can look at their past life karmas. And they even get used to predict when certain physical events occur. So I heard that the Indian government actually hires Jyotish astrologers to predict delays in train, plane, and bus schedules. So Jyotish astrologers, they really pride their craft. They believe that they have a tool of razor-sharp precision and are able to wield significant power with their knowledge in diagnostics regarding both the material and the unseen world. The one downside that I've personally encountered with a lot of these sidereal astrologers is that they can be quite rigid in their interpretations, and they can also be quite harsh. I've encountered a lot of clients who are told things by Jyotish astrologers that came across as unavoidable prophecies of doom, like you should never go there, otherwise your debilitated Mars will send vipers through the night, to annihilate you. Like these really kind of old mythic tales, like plagues of locusts, that type of thing. So yeah, you get kind of like anything. We some of us do have free will, and we have the ability to rewrite our fate. I say that because some people that choose not to become self-aware are often more fated in what they do in life, and they kind of follow a very set track. So therefore, this is an important reminder that the consciousness level of an individual, the consciousness level of an astrologer, must be considered in any reading, because the consciousness level will change the outcome of a reading drastically. And so many astrologers do not do this because, well, a lot of the time the people coming to see them could be at a higher level of consciousness. The astrologer just happens to know the mechanics of astrology better than they do. So it's very important, if you're ever getting a reading from somebody, that you also consider, it's their lens. And do you agree with their worldview? Like, does it seem cohesive with yours, or does it seem like it might be a little bit more black and white, a little bit more limited than yours? Okay, so now we're going to get into the tropical zodiac. So the tropical zodiac is actually the basis for Western astrology and human design. So chances are, if you are searching astrology on the internet or human design, that you'll encounter interpretations based on the tropical zodiac. So the tropical zodiac was developed in Mesopotamia in the 2nd century BC. It was actually developed in Babylon, to be specific. And this is, as the story goes, of course, what historians are led to believe. Now, Babylon isn't one of those ancient civilizations that people get all dreamy-eyed and sentimental about. It does boast some impressive technological advancement, but people kind of have the feeling that there was something gnarly going on with old Babylon there. So Babylon was where double-leveled walls were developed, the usury-based debt system that's still in play today, and it's the source of the strange cuneiform tablets that depict an alien overlord species called the Anunnaki coming to Earth and enslaving us. Okay. I get that I'm getting into some weird territory here, but it's actually all true. You can look this stuff up. Whether the Anunnaki came or not, I don't know, but the interpretations of these cuneiform tablets seem to suggest that, well, whoever created these tablets had a very advanced knowledge of things going on and a very interesting creation story. So Babylon seems to be the most widely accepted origin of the tropical zodiac. And unlike the other astrological systems at the time used in India, but also other parts of the world, the tropical zodiac was not referenced against the stars in the sky. Something changed. For the first time, it was referenced against where the sun rose on the spring equinox. So that position, where the sun rises on the spring equinox, is called 0 degrees Aries, whether that lines up with the actual 0 degrees Aries or not. So that position is the start of the zodiac. And 30 degrees from that point is the end of Aries and the beginning of the constellation Taurus. So you can see here with the wobble of the Earth, so the next 30 degrees is the rest of the sign of Aries and Taurus, and so forth. However, that point in the sky, which corresponds to 0 degrees of the constellation Aries, might not line up with 0 degrees Aries based on where the sun rises on the spring equinox. Now, roughly 2,000 years ago, they were lined up. The 0 degrees Aries was actually where the sun rose on the spring equinox. So if you looked at the sky, this tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac lined up. However, like I was saying earlier, that this migrates by 72 degrees, or by 1 degree every 72 years, meaning that every 72 years, it's going 1 degree more out of sync. So it's being progressively more offset as time goes on. Currently, we're at about 23 degrees, a difference between the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac. So you can see over time, there's a greater discrepancy between the two of them. Basically, what I'm saying here is what the tropical zodiac calls the constellations have nothing to do with the constellations of the actual stars in the sky. They're two different things. So it's called an abstraction, basically, and it's based on, like I said earlier, the seasons of the year. So Aries marks the beginning of spring, and so Aries in the northern hemispheres, spring is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, summer is Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and fall is Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and then finally winter is Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So it's mapped to the seasons of the year, not to the actual constellations in the sky. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, if we're calling a Taurus, shouldn't they be measuring the same thing? Well, apparently not. And the tropical astrologers say that it isn't really measuring what's happening in the sky anyways. It's measuring the seasons of the year, which represent the seasons of the soul. This is used a lot for agriculture. This has a lot of usage for our day-to-day life on planet Earth. And since the universe is an infinite holographic model, which is beyond the comprehension of the human mind, including myself, we can all see the systems of anything as being inherently limited. However, every system does create a sense of apparent order. So any model we use to map reality, we can see some kernel of truth in it, even though there is no model out there that can map all of reality. So they shouldn't even bother trying to have a theory of everything. Reality will outdo it, basically. So sidereal astrology, true sidereal astrology, and tropical astrology can all coexist with each other without one system negating the other, especially if we are honest about the fact that they measure different things. So now tropical astrology was further developed by a Greco-Egyptian astrologer named Ptolemy from nearly 2,000 years ago. And Ptolemy was part of the cool crowd in those days and got to hang around Alexandria and rub elbows at the largest and greatest library of the ancient world, which was the Library of Alexandria. Unfortunately, it was destroyed shortly after his lifetime. So in Ptolemy's time, though, the tropical zodiac would have actually just so happened to almost perfectly line up with the sidereal zodiac. In other words, on the spring equinox, the sun would rise pretty close to 0 degrees Aries. So Ptolemy could look at the sky and say, hey, if I just look at where the sun rises on the spring equinox, it's pretty much the same, and they didn't have instrumentation to see the very fine grained shifts that were happening on a fraction of a degree every year. So, for him, from his sake, it was basically, they were the same thing, only that a lot's changed since Ptolemy's day, and that the precession of the equinoxes has actually moved the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac from near alignment to a 23-degree offset today. So like I said before, every 72 years, this migrates 1 degree further apart. So these two systems continue to drift apart, and they're going to be even more apart than they are right now. So there's going to be even more arguments in the future, I bet, in 2,000 years from now when they're 46 degrees offset from each other. So given that the tropical zodiac is not concerned about the position of planets and stars in the sky, and instead measures fixed points based on the seasons of the year, the integrity of the system holds if it's looking at it through that lens. However, there's a catch here, one that many people are not talking about. And this actually has to do with something far more important, in my opinion. And this is what I came across while studying the colonic sciences with Ahamna Amaya and her partner, Alex Terrace. They had a little presentation on this, and it just clicked for me when I saw this. And that is basically on axis and off axis. So on axis is what we call being awake, or being basically moved by an organic timeline and an organic pulsation. Off axis is what I would call a synthetic pulsation. And so that basically means, what people tend to refer to as the matrix. It's a prime resonant frequency that is synthetic. Now, the synthetic off axis reality, it contains all the same dimensions as the on axis reality. It's like a carbon copy that they've just kind of twisted to be 23 degrees offset. So it's interesting. And I think, you have to kind of look at it from this perspective that the north and south pole of the Earth, the actual north and south pole of the Earth, run vertically, and horizontally we have the equator. This is the rod and staff formation. And basically with these two energetic axes, energy flows from the Earth's higher body and, by similarity, our higher bodies through various sacred geometry configurations down through the layers into our physical, emotional, and mental bodies. And similarly for the Earth, it's sort of how higher dimensional information is encoded in the Earth. So if the North Pole and the South Pole are lined up properly with the cosmos, and we're using a system that is on axis with that, we have these even 90-degree angles, and we're able to translate that information without distortions. Now, here's the catch. If we use systems that have this offset this is the kind of formation you get. And you can see here that the North Pole and South Pole are slanted. They're offset by 23 degrees because now we're looking at the magnetic North Pole and South Pole, the part that actually, moves with this, migrates with this sort of wobble of the Earth. And that creates various distortions. So it has all the same components as the on-axis, but it's a carbon copy. It's like it's a distorted copy. The easiest way to think about it is if you have heard of 432 hertz, and that 432 hertz creates a harmonious cymatic pattern, and 440 hertz does not create a harmonious cymatic pattern. So if you have a symphony playing the same piece of music, but one's tuned to 440 hertz, their prime resonant frequency is going to be slightly more discordant according to the cymatic pattern than the symphony tuned to 432 hertz. They're playing all the same music. It's the same performers, the same melodies, the same harmonies, the same everything, except the prime resonant frequency is different. And people might not notice, but they will feel it. They'll feel the difference with this. And the actual geometric pattern of 440 is discordant, like I said, versus 432, which is harmonious. So it's really, do we want to be measuring the life and reality, in an organic sense or in a synthetic sense? Now, people can easily get in here and say, well, organic good, synthetic bad. But that's not true because the synthetic is still a subset of the organic. And most of the world runs in the synthetic system. I mean, mainstream astrology in the West is used by billionaires. As you know, JP Morgan had a resident astrologer. And many of the great financial analysts in the city of London actually use Western tropical astrology software on their computer. So it's very good at predicting what I call the events of the movie script. And the movie script, of course, is this advanced military video game that we seem to all be a part of as events sort of show up on a global stage, and we all respond to them in our own ways, and hopefully some of us are tuning out and ignoring them. Reminds me of Timothy Leary's old saying, turn on, tune in, drop out of the background program and get on with your own program, which is the organic reality. And so I want you to see that the Earth's energy center system is in alignment with the organic on-axis version, the true sidereal system, or the sidereal system, and its off-axis version has various degrees of distortion. So this is from an energetic perspective, and something that I've come across more recently that really landed in this. This isn't something that you're going to find scientific proof about. This is something you've really got to understand. You've got to take this in, you got to sit with it, and it makes sense. Great. If you're triggered by it and you want to write, this is BS, I don't believe you at all, Dave. So, this is also going to be something that could trigger some people as well. And people will be like, what? I'm outraged by this, but sit with it. See if it yields truth. A lot of the time, and I was here too, I developed a whole business around the tropical zodiac. All my readings were in tropical, and then true sidereal came along, and I tried it out, and I'm like, this works better for me. And I made the decision to switch over. Now, I haven't really talked too much about true sidereal, but I just wanted to finish by saying, before I jump into that tropical is still good, and tropical still serves a lot of people. In fact, there's sometimes I still do tropical readings for people, but most of the time I have made the choice myself to use true sidereal or Fagan Bradley sidereal. And you might come to the same conclusion after watching this video or doing your own research. That's totally up to you. And whatever you choose to do, I just want you to do whatever feels right, and not, just be influenced by somebody else blindly because, you've really got to do what works for you. And that's the most important thing. Like I was saying earlier, each of these systems can help us find truth in their own way. So the true sidereal system is the last one I'm covering here, and it's the only system based on the sky exactly as it is. So both the tropical and the sidereal agree on the use of the same constellation boundaries being generalized into exactly 12 signs with exactly 30 degrees each. Now, that's way too simplistic. And it's not what the sky actually looks like. In fact, the ecliptic passing through the zodiac would actually look a lot more like this. So you can see there's very varying sizes of the different constellations, and there's even a missing sign called Ophiuchus. Now, I can relate to why astrologers in those days would have simplified into 12 signs, because the ancients often preferred a base 12 model of counting. And I'm not going to get into base 12 here, but I'll just have to say that it has to do with various sacred geometry, various orders of reality that were quite popular in the ancient world. So in any case, true sidereal has 13 signs of varying sizes based on constellation mapping, so boundary mapping that was done by satellites in the 1990s. So this is a very recent addition. It has only been around for 30 years, but it's also the most astronomically precise. As a result of that, it yields some very interesting results. And often when I read with the true sidereal system, people remember a lot about their identity and feel deeply seen. They really feel like they're touching upon their cosmic nature because they're getting in touch with the actual positioning of stars and planets and the actual boundaries of constellations. And so if we believe that there's various torsion fields and neutrinos that are streaming in from these, we're going to want to make sure that, we've checked to see if we're using what is astronomically there. If we're looking at these constellations, we can see their connection in the sky. It would make sense that any light passing through that is going to be filtered by it. So if we take that approach in astrology, then true sidereal holds its weight. And often when I read true sidereal for system, people, they are a little bit challenged because Aquarians have to realize that they're mostly Capricorns now. Libras turn out to be Virgos. I'm just kidding. No sign's better than another one. But this is the kind of thing that people experience, when their identity changes. So this is basically a summary of tropical sidereal and true sidereal, and I hope you enjoyed it. But if you do want to go deeper, I would highly suggest checking out the True Sidereal Summit that I spoke at. You can get recordings of this for just over $50 and access 4 days. It's like, I think 12 hours worth of content from the pillars of true sidereal. Like I'm talking Ethan Chimenti, who invented true sidereal astrology, Richard Mason, who invented cosmic human design, which is basically true sidereal human design. And yours truly, I'm speaking at that summit, along with 10 other incredible men and women who have fearlessly contributed to advancing the School of Astrology and Human Design, especially in the true sidereal branch, which is, of course, a very new branch and a very exciting branch that we've seen amazing results with. Also, I have a free 3-day journey with my own true sidereal self-exploration system called Trifecta. You can get started for free. You can even get a free reading with this to reveal and heal your core wound. That's where this system starts. And it basically is like a guided process for unraveling yourself. So it's a little bit like the Gene Keys, a little bit like astrology, a little bit like human design, but with the true sidereal zodiac and with my own spin put on there. And trust me, this a lot of people have tried this. I've had over 1,500 people try this reading, and I've had amazing results from people. So go, if you haven't already, and get your free profile. The link is in the description below. Finally, there's the Octave Leap Academy, where I've launched a full school for tropical and true sidereal astrology, human design, and gene keys. Also, Trifecta is in there, and you can see the innovative techniques and processes that I've created and put up there. You can learn cutting-edge techniques at your own pace for either your own self-discovery or to help your readings. And these are very reasonably priced courses. In fact, the human design course is taught by somebody who brought human design to the Netherlands. She's a real powerhouse in human design, and she's offering this for probably 1/5 or 1/10 of the cost of other comprehensive human design courses. So you got lots of stuff for you guys to go in further here and to really dig in and to really absorb this material. So be sure to tune in next week. I'm doing a big show on the energy ahead for 2025. This one is huge. It's going to be astrology. It's going to be the human collective. We're going to go into some really cool areas for the days ahead. All right, folks, take care. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Bye-bye.